been on this planet various times that taught you your body was a sinful, lowly thing, and that you had to develop your spirit and basically throw your body in the garbage, and the body is bad, and there's a whole mentality that was put on this planet that didn't belong here about persecuting the body and treating it as a lowly, sinful, disgusting thing. This affected everything in the way our cultures developed. It affected the intimate aspects of our cultural development, where it has ruined the natural ability to share love and energy and soul through the body that used to be the gift of human males and females, that they could come together and share their souls and the God energy and create a God field within and around them through the sacred act of making love, those kind of things. Because we've been told things about our body, and this stuff has been programmed in for generation after generation, we carry an imprint in our DNA template that is a reversal of the natural order of those things. It creates unnatural responses from a subconscious level in literally the body systems, where we tend to have that fight or flight instinct that the scientists call it the fight or flight instinct, either aggressive or passive kind of relationship. The body has always been a sacred temple. The old teachings, before the corrupted teachings were brought here that taught us to hate ourselves, told us of the beauty of the energy of God that forms our body, because our bodies are made out of the same exact thing that our consciousness is made out of. There is no difference whatsoever between the substance that your spirit is made of and the substance that your body is made out of, other than where it is placed in the dimensional scale. That's the only difference. Same stuff, just some of it is placed in lower frequencies and some of it in higher frequencies. So with this information, we begin to learn about the substance of consciousness, the substance of God. We begin to learn about science as well. We begin to learn about the foundation building blocks of all matter, which are called particulier, particulier, and particum. And we're going to start there with our discussion. We're going to talk about the particulier, particulier, and particum in conjunction with what are called primal forces. Now we have God's source, all right? Let's say there's God's source. And within God's source, it creates an arena where it can know itself in many different forms, as if it were externalized from itself. Imagine you're sitting there, and you don't have a body. Just imagine you're a cloud of consciousness, right? And you want to play. You want to experience. You want to explore. You know you're awake. You know you're aware. You have feeling. You have movement. You want to create. You have the urge and desire to create, to know yourself better. What does that mean? This is the way creation continually occurs. God is an identity, a living being, breathing, heartbeat, all that stuff, except it's beyond physical. And it creates by thinking. And these worlds that we live in, that we call matter worlds, are literally thought forms within the consciousness of God. Our thought forms do the same thing. We don't see the product directly, as quickly as we might like to. If you say, okay, I want to make a house, your thought form of a house. Well, it popped up somewhere. You did create a house because you are the embodied consciousness of God. You forgot your manifestation process, but it still works on autopilot. That can be very dangerous on autopilot because you're creating stuff you don't want to create. If you say to yourself, oh, I swear I'm getting old, you're making yourself get older faster. All right? We start to learn the power of our connection to God when we begin to understand, all right, what is the stuff between here and God? I feel like God's away from me and I'm away from God. We're around each other somewhere, but God is not standing next to me. They say God's in me, but I don't feel that. I feel like just a kind of mortal little person, those little sinful, pathetic animal creatures that they tell us about. We feel like we're little and pathetic because we've been told for so long that we are, that we've actually created that condition in our DNA. We've mutated ourselves and had a lot of help doing it. Now, when we begin to understand primal life force as if, this is where it starts, where God decides, God's source decides, it wants to create creation. Creation would be movement within itself. It would be experience other than the all-knowing being, still point. If you were very still and you wanted to do something, it implies movement. God had to create movement in order to create creation. Movement first in the form of vibration within yourself. and you decide you're going to create within yourself, and you bring that big attention in. It's like taking your vision from here and bringing it into a little laser beam point, as if you were, say, looking at a book. That difference between your focus is out here, then bringing it into a very tight focus. The first vibration, thought form, that allowed the creation that we're existing in to happen was God literally bringing a portion of its consciousness into a little tight laser beam focus. Not all of it, just a part of it within the massive eternal field of the God consciousness field. From that little point, that created the first point in the Trinity, the point of all union, which we call the unici. Now, the word unici means point of all union. It is the creation point where creation begins. There's another place where manifestation begins. First, creation, the desire to create, begins. So God took a part of its consciousness and focused it within itself very tightly. And it created itself as the first element, the first vibrational field of consciousness. That field is called the ManU field. Again, it's a translation of part of the audible or translatable in external terms, vibration field that represents that level of the consciousness of God. The first part was the ManU force. From the ManU force, there were two other forces that simultaneously emerged. This is where we get the Divine Trinity. The EirA and the ManA force. So you had one vibration, let's say one scalar standing wave, and it was split into two. And through dynamics, we'll learn more about the intense dynamics in this evening in the Dance for Love program. But that one didn't become two, become three. It became one and then two that made three. That means, when you take it into simple terms, to how that principle works down here, we get gender polarization, male and female, that originally came from one androgynous source. All right. The male didn't come first. Hate to tell you, hate to tell the Pope, but the male didn't come first. This was a distortion of teachings that was put here for very important reasons to the fallen angelics who wanted to control our consciousness field here. And women were very, very dangerous to them because they were able to pull in large amounts of the ManU consciousness because of the way women are coded. There's an interesting thing between women and men. The male body form is the polarity that transmits a bit stronger than it receives. And the female form receives a bit stronger than it transmits. And you put them both together and they have perfect balance. They're perfectly balanced within themselves as well. This goes back to the original creation. At first there was the ManU force, a consciousness field that God created within itself. God's big consciousness field, it created a tiny point of consciousness, a focus of attention that it would create. And that created a portion of itself as the ManA field. Then that ManA field broke down into two, into the EirA, which would be the Divine Mother or seed, and the ManA, which would be the Divine Father or spark. Now these are beings without bodies so far. All right? We don't even have gender in that sense yet. So we have the ManU as the point of the unified consciousness, the androgynous consciousness. That is the part of us that was created in the image of God. Because in truth, we are spirit that is the unified part. And we can experience ourselves in either polarity, but we are still created in the image of God as a singular, first and foremost, a singular focus of individuated identity that is a replica of the ManU force. So we each have ManU force consciousness within our being. We also have the two polarities of the EirA force, divine feminine, and the ManA force, divine masculine, within our beings. The process of spiritual integration has to do with integrating those forces and bringing them back into one while allowing the polarities to be in perfect balance. Then you can hold the Divine Trinity in manifestation, and you can experience all sorts of holograms as you choose to create them. Problems happen in the manifest fields when those polarities come out of balance, and it disrupts the natural flow of consciousness that is meant to take place between the ManU, the EirA, and the ManA aspects of our own identity. This can happen on universal levels too. Right now, we'll find out in the Metatron workshop tomorrow that there are some things happening on very, very high levels in our time matrix, that we'll talk about in a minute, that have to do with imbalances that have occurred in these forces within this time matrix itself. Humans were created as the angelic race that was supposed to help heal that. So, we go back to first creation and the divine trinity of the ManU,